Hi everyone, right now we are about to roast a medium roast. The things that I like best about medium roast is it still has some characteristics of light roast. You can taste fruitiness and florality of the coffee. But what we're doing here is we're trying to add a bit more caramelization, a bit more Maillard to the coffee. That is going to balance the acidity. It's going to introduce some more like familiar notes in coffee, some caramels and things like that, just to make a really rich and delicious cup. The things I really like about roasting medium roasts on the Stronghold is that you have such an even development, is that we can even start to use some of these roasts on espresso. This is the time that you start to get dark enough, that you have enough solubility, that you can get some really nice espressos off of a roaster like this. So we're gonna start right now. I have the same hot air, same halogen, same start temperature. I'm gonna use a little bit more on the drum heater. This is gonna give me some more conductive heat, which is kind of a classic flavor in some medium roasts. And then we have the same bean agitation. So for me, medium roast, in terms of definition, is you are developing a little bit more. Like we said, we taste those caramels. We're looking for almost no sort of roasty flavors, some of those sort of classic kind of toasty notes. We are either just tasting a little bit of them or have none of them. The big thing that I'm going for here is making sure we have well developed and caramelized flavors and some sort of chocolatey flavors in conjunction with that fruit. Halogen to give me good development of the coffee. I'm gonna push it a little bit further than a light roast into more of a brown territory. We'll still have the halogen off by first crack, because at first crack, that's where the coffee's really delicate and we wanna make sure that we don't introduce any roasty flavors. But I'm gonna take it quite a bit further just to make sure we have great caramel flavors and we're lowering that acidity. So you might wonder how I'm gonna achieve a darker roast with the same charge temperature and many of the same settings. The way we're gonna do it is by making sure that that halogen's on, especially during the browning phase prior to first crack. This is a great way to get some development on the coffee prior to first crack. And then once we're into first crack, I'm gonna extend that time, because that's really where the coffee's browning the most, is during those reactions during first crack. So I'm gonna come in a little bit softer, and that's gonna allow me to draw out that section of the roast. A longer first crack time, a longer development time, is gonna give us a slightly darker, more developed roast, pushing us into that medium roast phase. The coffee's still green, which means there's still moisture in there, so I can keep my halogen pretty high. I have no worries about any scorching or anything like that from high halogen. Moisture's still leaving the coffee, and so we're still really safe there. I'm gonna move the drum heater down to 4 from 4.5. This is just because you can see it starting to raise up. I want lots of heat coming from that drum, but not too much. We'll use an even more intense heat when we do a dark roast, but for now, I just wanna make sure that drum is adding heat to the roast without actually heavily influencing the amount of heat I have in the drum. Coffee's reaching more of a straw color now, so I'm gonna move the halogen down just a little bit. We're gonna go from 9 to 7. Still a good amount of halogen, still having a big impact on the coffee, but just a little bit more gentle. Around this part of the roast, I want to see my drum surface temperature gently declining. This is just to ensure that things aren't too hot once I hit first crack, that most of my heat is still mostly convective. On a medium roast, we're gonna have some conductive heat because we want some of those flavors. I don't want to push it too far in one direction though, so we're gonna go down to 3.5. What I'm trying to do here is balance the amount of convective heat, so that's heat coming from the air, with my amount of conductive heat, and that's heat coming from the drum. We're now at a tan color on the roast. I'm gonna keep my halogen though. I wanna push that into more of a light brown. I'm gonna pull a little bit of hot air out. This is again to balance how much convective and conductive heat I have in my system right now. I'm gonna pull a bit of halogen down. This is just to make sure that by the time I do hit first crack, that the halogen's completely off, because we're at sort of a light brown, dark tan now. So first crack is coming up soon. Generally on the bean surface, we're looking at first crack between 390 and about 400 degrees Fahrenheit. That has a large impact on, it has a lot to do with the altitude that you're at. We're at a fairly high altitude here, so I do find that coffees tend to crack a little bit earlier. You can see I have a declining rate now on my drum surface temperature. That's exactly where I want to be. At about 390 on my bean surface temperature, I'm gonna pull out the rest of the halogen. I have a really lovely light brown color now. I think we have got great development going on. But I just want to make sure that halogen is used just to give us great caramel flavors. We're not going to introduce any like classic roast flavors right now. So halogen's down to 0 now. So now we have hot air and the conductive heat from the drum are our main sources of heat right now. Our rates on our bean surface are around 5.5 to 6. Looking good. You're gonna hear first crack, so I'm gonna mark right there. And this is really, medium roast, a big thing is also that development time and that end temperature. So I'm gonna aim for between 1:40 to 2 minutes of development time. Just controlling my rates. I need to make sure that my rates are low so I don't scorch anything, but enough to keep that crack rolling and vigorous. The drum heater is gonna do a great job making sure that there's enough energy in the system to prevent any stalls. This is especially useful for long roasts where you might have to use lower rates of rise to achieve your development time. That drum being hot is gonna make sure that things have momentum even as I pull heat out of the system. So right now I'm just watching my rates to make sure nothing tips back up, that we're holding a very steady rate. Especially when you first start roasting a new coffee, I think it's better to leave heat in the system to make sure the crack is continuing than to pull it out and potentially stall it. I am always on the side of having a bit too much energy rather than not enough. So at 1:30, bean surface temperature is 407. We're gonna take to about 410 for this roast. I'm gonna pull a little bit of heat out because that's how it's going up. We're at 410, I'm just gonna give it a little bit more. Get our end temperature closer to that 410. The rates are coming up, so I'm just pulling the heat down a little bit. Things are looking really good. I still hear a couple pops. I'm gonna let it go a little bit further just to make sure we have full development. And we'll reset there. And there's the medium roast.